What is up? You're about to learn two simple ideas that you can use to level up your chess in no time. Here's the first example. It is black to play and hopefully win. And while you're thinking about this, let me tell you why do I think these ideas are so important. Now, I'm a grandmaster and I've been coaching for the last 15 years, and over this time I've seen lots of stories of people who got into chess. And unfortunately, one of the most common story is that someone got interested into chess and they learn all the fundamentals, and initially they progress pretty quickly. They climb up to the level of, let's say, 1000 or 1200 or whatever it may be, and after that they hit the plateau and they stuck. And unfortunately, sometimes for the rest of their life. Their rating can fluctuate a little up and down, but there is never a breakthrough. And I've noticed that there are very simple ideas, in fact, that are missing for people, and they keep making the same mistakes, which are very easy to eliminate from your games if you just knew how to do it right. Talking about the current position, most players realize that there is this check rook to d8 that would attack the king, but also would x-ray the knight on d2, and that looks like potentially a winning idea. But there's a problem. If you go rook d8 straight away with this intent, then you also lose this knight on c5, and therefore it does not work straight away. You do not win material. Yes, you can get back the knight on d2, but you lost the one on c5. Therefore, it does not work straight away. And then people start thinking next. They think, okay, what if I trade off this knight first and then go rook d8? Okay, if you do that and your opponent is kind enough to capture with a pawn, then this idea would work out perfectly well and you would indeed win a piece and get a winning position. However, it's more natural for white to capture with their own knight and therefore remove the knight from the d-file, and now you can deliver this check, but it does not attack anything besides the king, and the king can easily move away. Again, you did not achieve anything. Then we start thinking next, okay, so how do we make this idea work? And then you think, okay, how about knight to d3 so that I remove the knight with a tempo and attack the rook and maybe something else, the pawn on b2. Well, the rook will probably move somewhere. Now we can play rook d8 check, and the nice thing about that is that it looks like almost a checkmate, but in reality, not exactly a checkmate, because the king can go either here or here, and after this, we cannot take the knight on d2 because our own knight obstructs the file, and we cannot do that. And now, again, the situation remains to be unclear. It's not easy for white to see how they can, or for black, I mean, to see how black can get any noticeable advantage. So let's take it back. And after trying these couple things, we kind of get stuck and we think, oh, I'm not sure, maybe I just trade off everything on b3 or whatever and go rook c2, like something like that. And I think that the real reason to why we were unable to find a winning idea for black is not even a lack of calculation abilities, but rather the fact that we got stuck with the rook to d8 idea and we always tried to push it through. And the solution here is to avoid that tunnel vision, to avoid being obsessed with the idea that came to your mind first and that looks very lucrative at first, but instead to stay open-minded and to look for candidate moves, to be on the lookout for different attacking options. And if we switch away from the rook d8 idea and we ask ourselves, okay, so what are the candidate moves that we have here? We can pretty easily see that besides rook to d8, there is another check, knight to b7, and that is also something worth calculating. Moreover, now the king has only one square to go to, king to e5. And now, as we look into this position, we can see that actually the same situation with the king and the rook standing on the same file occurs this time along the e-file. And we can capitalize on that by trading off the bishop and then go on rook e8. And now this idea of an x-ray works perfectly well. On the next move, we're going to pick up that rook on e1 and we are winning the game. Now you can practice what you've learned. It is white to play and win. Please think about this, and if you can find the winning idea, write it down in comments below. It's a pretty advanced example, therefore if you cannot find it, do not be discouraged. You can still go to the comments and somebody certainly will write the correct solution. There is also another situation where the same tunnel vision works against you. Let me show you some very common example of that. As we enter some common opening position, at this point white's got a really nice tactical idea. Knight takes e5, which is a temporary sacrifice of a knight, and then we play pawn d4 and we get it back on the next move. In most cases, your opponents are getting confused, and also they're also playing the first move that comes to their mind. They're not trying to consider candidate moves, and they play bishop takes d4 because they think that, okay, if I'm going to lose a piece, at least I'm going to get a pawn for it. And bishop takes d4 is actually wrong because after queen takes, we now have a strong center. We attack this knight. The knight can't easily move away because that will drop the pawn on g7. We've got two bishops, and overwhelming position overall. So for black, it would also be nice to avoid that tunnel vision, to ask themselves what are the candidate moves, and then they would probably notice that they've got to move pawn d6 as well, which could support both pieces, or move bishop d6, which is even better, because then after this trade, black ends up with a strong bishop in the middle of the board. They're not like down in any way, and the game goes on. So that's what they should have done, but instead they play, again, the first move that comes to their mind, bishop takes d4, and after queen takes, they find themselves in trouble. And the very first thing they need to deal with is to defend this knight, which can't go away because it has to guard the pawn on g7. Now, if they play queen to f6, think about this. How would you play here if you were white? Some natural ideas that comes to mind are either f4 to chase away this knight, or even better to play knight d5. That looks like a completely winning idea because it hits the queen, it hits the pawn. From here we're going to fork the king and the rook, and the queen cannot easily move away because it has to guard the knight on e5. Looks like we're just crushing it completely. But the problem is, when we get into this tunnel vision, and especially when the move seems tempting, seems like a winning idea, we just straight away go ahead and rush to play it, only to find out right after that it was a blunder. And quite often we realize that it was a blunder right after putting the piece into that square. Right after that we realize that black's got this knight to f3 counter strike, and that is a discovered attack of the queen, and we are going to be the one losing material. We'll have to drop the queen on d4. And that is especially sad because the position was actually absolutely great for white. It's just that you shouldn't blunder this knight f3 thing. And for example, white could play bishop e3, defend the queen, so that we are not blundering anything, and on the next move, all these knight d5 and f4 ideas would indeed probably win the game for you, and you would have an absolutely terrific position. And the bottom line is you should not be possessed by a good-looking idea, and you should think it through, at least for just one move. You don't have to calculate a ton of variations. Just think it through for one move. So you think for yourself, what if I play knight to d5? What will my opponent play? And mainly we're interested in his aggressive responses, because if he just plays something like queen d8, we don't care, right? That there is no danger there. So all we care about are forcing and aggressive moves on your half of the board, and that's what you need to check. Can your opponent go forward to this territory and check or capture something or attack something? Those are the moves that you care about. You can check them quickly and prevent all these blunders like that. If we take it a step back, there is another interesting variation here. If instead of queen f6, black plays a more natural move pawn d6, now white plays pawn f4, he wishes to chase this knight away and then grab the pawn on g7, black plays queen h4, check, and how would you play here? Well, you know that there is a catch, right? But after the previous things that we discussed, you know that you should not play the first move that comes to mind. You should think it through for just one move ahead and ask yourself, what is my opponent going to do? In most cases, white is going to play pawn g3, which is a blunder, and it blunders the move knight to f3. And now the situation turns around, and black's got pretty nice counterattack. Of course, initially, white played the move g3 because they thought that it's going to attack the queen, and as it goes away, we're going to win the knight on e5 and win the game. Again, everything looks so cool, and we rush to play the move pawn g3, overlooking knight to f3 counterblow. And that's why, once again, we should not play those tempting moves straight away, but think them through at least for some seconds and ask ourselves, what is going to be the move of our opponent? Can he go forward and attack us? In this case, white is a little bit lucky that after knight f3, he's not losing the game straight away, because let's say king f2, and he's losing the queen on d4, but at least he can also capture the queen. Nevertheless, he's losing a pawn on c2, and he has to split up his other pawns on the king side, so certainly he ruined his position, although like here he was lucky that it's not completely losing for white. Now, if we were able to control our impulses, to think them through and not to play the move g3, you'd ask yourself, what is the right move to play then? And then we can see that you can play queen f2 and cover up your king that way. That will force black to trade off queens, and after that white ends up with a great position, virtually strategically winning position. We've got a strong center, we still attack this knight, we've got two bishops advantage, two strong bishops that control the entire board, and knight to d5 is still coming, hitting this pawn, and after that, forking the king and rook. Black's got this one check, but that doesn't mean much. We can just move away and we save all the advantages of our position. Therefore, that would be really great. There is a fallacy that in order to get better at chess, you need to study absolutely everything, and on top of that, to have that mysterious chess talent and to start playing at the age of 3, and only then you've got a chance. But in reality, you can see that there are very simple ideas that if you implement them, you can be ahead of your opponents, straight away, very easy and very quick. If you're interested in that, I've got a dedicated course called 3 Steps to 2000 ELO, where I've put together those simple ideas that make a big difference and to show you a clear blueprint for chess improvement. If you're curious, I'll drop a link down below the video in the description. Either way, keep crushing it and let me know if you have any questions in comments below.